Roughly 230 million years ago, Europe was just a slim stretch of land separating Asia in the north from North America in the south. Much of the reptilian life in these coastal regions was either marine or semi-aquatic. But there were also flourishing ecosystems in the Triassic forests behind the beaches. If you could step onto an Italian shoreline of that era, you wouldn't see crowds of sunbathers. Rather, you'd find exotic reptiles, taking advantage of the warm coastal climate. Among them was Tanystropheus, an animal with an extraordinarily elongated neck that made up almost half its total body length. Measuring around 6 meters from head to tail, this reptile resembled a land-based plesiosaur. Groups of Tanystropheus lounged on rocky beaches, raising their long necks to soak in the heat. Their style of feeding was just as striking. Stationed at the water's edge, they craned their necks over tidal pools or bays, then used their needle-like teeth to snatch unsuspecting fish. The Triassic seas around Europe were home to an incredible variety of bizarre organisms. Among these were the placodonts, marine reptiles adapted to feed on shellfish. One well-known member, Placodus, had a robust beak designed for crunching through tough shells. Even odder was Henodus, often likened to a sea turtle, sporting a broad, circular shell that protected it from threats like Triassic sharks and ichthyosaurs. Such thick armor made these placodonts difficult targets for any predator. Around the same time, the first turtles began to appear in European waterways. A species called Progonochelys favored freshwater environments and looked like an early tortoise, with a jagged shell and a spiky neck and head. Elsewhere in the region, other peculiar reptiles lived in the warm seas. For instance, Dactylosaurus was an early member of the Pachypleurosaurs, bearing a superficial likeness to plesiosaurs, but still maintaining distinct fingers on its forelimbs, an ancestral characteristic. More familiar groups, like the ichthyosaurs, also prospered. Near what is now Greenland and Iceland, a smaller ichthyosaur, known as Gripia, dating to around 235 million years ago, hunted fish, smaller reptiles, crustaceans, and mollusks in open waters. Moving inland, the Triassic forests on these scattered coastal islands supported a range of novel reptiles. One such example was Icarosaurus, a Polish gliding reptile equipped with thin membranes between its limbs that enabled it to glide from branch to branch while chasing insects. Its limbs were long and spindly, almost insect-like, and it thrived high above the ground, safe from large predators roaming below. Deep in Italian forests, a creature called Drepanosaurus lived an arboreal lifestyle reminiscent of modern tree-climbing mammals such as pangolins. With a muscular, prehensile tail and hooked claws, it clung securely to branches while it searched for insects. This reptile's broad ridged back, combined with a tail that worked like an extra limb, gave it the stability of a chameleon as it moved along high perches. Occasionally, adventurous creatures like Drepanosaurus would come down from the canopy to hunt for insects on the forest floor. In more open habitats, strange herbivores like Hyperodopedon, which resembled a squat reptilian rodent with large gnawing teeth, ate tubers and other vegetation. And from these same Italian environments, the first tiny pterosaurs, such as Dinosaurs, with small wingspans, took to the skies. Across the ocean in North America, marine reptiles reached impressive sizes. The ichthyosaur Shastasaurus, for example, could reach 21 meters, making it the largest marine predator of the Triassic. It likely used a vacuum-like feeding strategy, gulping cephalopods in swift bursts. Closer to the coast, somewhat smaller ichthyosaurs like Cymbospondylus and Chorosaurus patrolled shallower waters. On land, species like Hyperonecta, a drapanosaur capable of gliding with a sail-like tail, thrived in wooded areas. Meanwhile, the thick-skulled Triopticus, belonging to the Archosauriform lineage, lumbered through forest clearings. In South America's more arid settings, nimble archosaurs like Marasuchus, bearing proto-feathery filaments and a stance reminiscent of a small kangaroo, darted around. Plant-eating silosaurids, such as Ignotosaurus, grazed near rivers, while the predator, Lagosuchus, showcased traits bridging early reptiles and dinosaurs. Across Africa, formidable carnivores like Erythrosuchus, a 5-meter behemoth with a huge skull, held the apex role. Along rivers dwelled Proterosuchus, with a crocodilian form well suited for ambushing creatures like the herbivorous Lystrosaurus. Meanwhile, the tiny rhynchosaur Mesosuchus, at only 30 centimeters long, foraged for plants in forested regions. In Oceania and Antarctica, temperate plains supported a range of reptiles, including Procolophon, a small herbivore that endured past the catastrophic Permian extinction. Australia's Tasmaniasaurus and Calisuchus were small meat-eaters, while Antarctica housed species evolving early adaptations to a range of environments, benefiting from the relatively mild climate of the Triassic. Asia, known for its climatic extremes, hosted curiosities like Odontochelis, an early turtle with partial shells and marine tendencies. Along the shores, Nothosaurus thrived, while the hammerhead-snouted Atopodontatus sifted the seabed for food. Asia's forests also gave rise to gliding reptiles like Charovipteryx, which used skin flaps attached to its legs, and Longisquama, whose unusual appendages might have served for display or limited aerial movement. Meanwhile, in ancient India's woodlands, the 4-meter herbivore Shrinkosaurus sported forward-facing horns, possibly used for sparring or showing off to rivals. Despite looking vaguely like a small sauropod, it moved more like a modern lizard with a sprawling stance, another testament to the Triassic's wide evolutionary experimentation. All of these creatures, massive ocean predators, gliding reptiles, spiky herbivores, and more, made the Triassic a time of extraordinary variety and experimentation. These evolutionary oddities, many of which have no parallels today, highlight the sheer unpredictability of life during this period. Thank you for joining this Triassic journey. This is Connected Era. Stick around for more amazing voyages into the deep past.